Hello and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here as always to discuss mind-body issues with you. Now, of course, this is a Q&A, so this will not be surprising, but really, even more than most Q&As, my Q&As are designed exactly the way I work. You're supposed to ask the questions you need asked and answered to be able to get better from mind-body symptoms. My answers aren't just answers, they're the beginnings or they're the continuation of a conversation. And this conversation needs to get you the answers you need about your mind body symptoms. Now, for those of you who don't know me, or even just as review for people who do know me, I had 8 years of chronic back pain. It was every single day, every single moment. I never got a break from it. And I'm not even talking like a single second. And I didn't think I was going to get better. Well, I discovered the works of Dr. John Sarno, luckily, although it was not so lucky that it took 8 years to get there. So we're going to discuss all kinds of things, including, well, how did I get, what information did I get from that? And why does my system extend that even further? Because I really needed some answers that even Dr. Sarno's answers didn't quite provide in the way that I was hoping or needing. And the thing is, to get better from mind body symptoms, you've got to know all of the answers to your questions. You have to understand what's happening fully, because Dr. Sarno says in his books, you've got to accept the diagnosis to get better. That's 100% true. But how do you accept a diagnosis where you don't understand part of it? And so my job is to just explain it even more fully. I've developed this system that can help us do that. It's called the column system, or the 3-column system. And that derives its name from these exercises I would do, these mind-body maps, where people would take a piece of paper and I'd say divide it into 3 columns. And they're the emotions, doubt, and power column. I say this every time. Hopefully it's good review for the people who are returning, but for anybody new, they need to hear this. The emotions column is describing the part of mind-body experience where an emotional experience outside of your awareness is too painful and a symptom comes in to distract it. But there are other ways that mind-body symptoms manifest. The doubt column is another one of those ways. Your thought process, whatever it is, however you're thinking about your body, your symptoms, or you, can determine whether those symptoms just stay right where they are, and they can stay at a very high level and just stay stuck. That is what was happening for me. It was not emotional. The emotions may have started the onset of the symptoms, because that's what they do, but the doubt is what continues it. And finally, the power column is where we work on our relationship with ourselves. And that usually comes in when you've got doubt down and you've pretty much figured out what your emotional themes are and how to understand how they're playing out in a mind-body sort of way, but something's hanging on. Something doesn't feel totally aligned. And that's the whole point of the power column, is to get aligned with yourself. So before we dive in, one more thing to talk about, which is my website is where you can get the resources that you need. It's www.crushingdoubt.org. And on the website, there's really 2 main ways that you can get help. There's others, because you can certainly contact me through email, and there's information on there. But I have teaching seminars that teach all about mind-body process and how to understand it. And this is a particularly good tool for people who really know about the mind-body experience, have been working in the mind-body field. They hear different perspectives from different people. This is a great tool to get you a central idea of why these things all fit together and how. Why do they seem to contradict, and how are they actually not contradicting, but really just filling in one part of the story? My system fills in the whole thing. So you can order the seminars on there. In addition, I started those seminars and I would teach people about mind-body issues. And then I found they really needed follow-up. And they particularly needed follow-up from me, because I'm the one who knows my system backwards and forwards. And so I started these groups. My membership groups meet 3 days a week. You can come talk with me. You can hear from group members. You can learn from the conversations I have with them. And they really get people very far. They're similar to this Q&A in terms of the initial format, because people are asking me questions and I'm giving answers. But because it's a Zoom call where we're there together, there's a lot more give and take. And we can get further down the road in those groups. So if you have any questions about it, please do let me know. You can email me at dan@crushingdoubt.org. But please don't hesitate to get the resources you need, or even just to ask the questions. It doesn't cost anything to ask a question. So ask the questions. Let's get you on your way to feeling better. Okay, that's a long preamble, but I have a lot to say always. So Let's jump in and say hi to some people. Catherine Toomer, good to see you here. Rita, thanks for joining me on Instagram as well. Frank Jolie, thank you for joining here. Susie Cairns, good to see you as well. We have some comments coming in from YouTube, and we'll jump in with that. Okay, Karen Isaacs, good to see you here. Success-ish story. Okay, well, I like the success part. We'll work on the ish, but at least it's somewhat successful. I was in Nashville last week. I woke up with a headache one day, but it never got too bad. I was able to still have fun. When I could, I went back to the room to be in my AC room alone. I was then able to rally at night, but my sneezing sniffles still bad, although they come and go. So what I hear in that, Karen, is exactly as you described it. It's success-ish because you were able to make some gains that you hadn't had before. There would be times where you might wake up with a headache and feel like it dominated your day. Now, I know you've come a long way even before meeting me. So you've already done a lot of this work. But one of the things I've heard you make reference to at times is that I've added something to your knowledge. And I think that, Karen is somebody who worked with Sarno, as I recall, long ago, and she made progress and she's made lots of progress, but doubt and power have been two ideas that have contributed quite a lot to her expanding things. What I hear in this, Karen, is actually doubt is still lingering around the edges. One thing I want to encourage you guys is you've got to challenge every doubt. Doubt's going to tell you, oh, I can get success to a certain point. I can get success-ish stories, but I can't get full success. And I'm not telling you to demand that of yourself or to criticize yourself for not getting it. Absolutely not. But doubt could be telling you a story. Oh, I can do that within reason. I can do it to a certain degree. And I want you to push doubt. I want you to ask it, oh yeah, why couldn't I get all better? And I want you to think about it. Why not? So I see a lot of success in this, and that's great, Karen. The question I would have, well, actually, there's two parts. One, good for you that you took care of yourself. You don't have to push yourself so hard, even in fighting doubt. You got to give yourself room to say, you know what? I'm going to go have fun during the day, and I'm going to give myself space to relax and not have to do battle. I'm going to be in that, air-conditioned room by myself. Good job taking care of yourself. I would say in many ways it's a power column move, but let's also have you push on doubt a little bit. What I'd like to do now, Karen, is to hear from you about what you think the doubts might have been. Because as you guys know, in the doubt column, I talk about the 3 steps: observe, articulate, and counter. I've just observed, meaning I'm calling into question a doubt you may have. Like, for instance, and now I'm going to articulate it. Do you think, or I'm going to articulate it as if you do have this doubt. I don't know if you do, Karen, but let's see. Maybe you're saying to yourself, I can get partially better, but I'll never be all better. That would be a doubt that I would have just articulated. And once you have that articulated, you can start doing battle with it. You can start asking, well, why? Why did other people get better? Why would I not? Or I beat other symptoms. Why would I not beat this one? Or I've beaten this very symptom before, but why not this time? The more articulated it is, the more answers you can get. All right, Karen, let's see where that goes, okay? Chris Atwater, good to see you, my friend. Chris says, power column question. When I think of this column, I think of Groundhog Day, one of my favorite movies. Rita says, I could never love someone like you. You only love yourself, Phil. Oh, no, you only love yourself. And then Phil says, that's not true. I don't even like myself. Definitely one of the quotes that I could have rattled off. Chris, I see you have further comments on this, but I want to say something about it first, I think. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to go through and read all your comments on this line of thought, and then we'll go from there. Chris then says, feel like I spent a ton of years running from my reality, perhaps with visions of grandeur. But it reminds me of a quote from an album: wherever you go too, and spoil everything. There's more comments, Chris, but I got to say, when I hear this and I hear you thinking that about you, it makes me sad. I actually know Chris personally, and he is a fantastic guy. He doesn't know how good he is. And in a way, you know what I'm talking about, Chris, but we got to keep talking about it. It makes me sad that you feel this way about yourself, and you're not going to actually have to stay there, which is going to get to your further comments. I'm going to say something about that in a second. Okay. Then Chris says, feel more at peace with myself these days, proud of where I'm from, the people I've met and known, but not sure I will ever have a super positive relationship with myself. Not sure how to cross that hurdle. I have no reason to believe I shouldn't, but it feels kind of pie in the sky thinking at this point. Spend a lot of time in regretville. Okay, so let's jump back to the beginning here. This is all power column. The power column is about your relationship with yourself, and it's about coming to peace with yourself. And many people say to me, I don't know how I would ever do that. And I don't blame them. I went through 20 years of therapy trying to get to peace with myself. Ostensibly, that's what I was doing. And ostensibly, that's what the therapists were, trying to do with me. We didn't get there. And we really didn't get very far at all in some ways. I got to better understanding. I felt more skilled. I guess I felt better about myself in those ways. But the core part of my experience that hurt and the parts of me that didn't like me, they didn't change at all. Now, what did change them? They started to change actually when I ended a therapy. And I ended this therapy because I had had enough. I had had enough of not feeling um, really appropriately empathized with, which was interesting because I didn't realize it, but I wasn't empathizing with myself enough. I was actually attacking myself. And that's what I hear in this statement, Chris, when you say, wherever you go too, and spoil everything. It's, you're saying I'm ruining my own party. I'm the problem. And you're having doubts, very understandable, but you're having doubts that you can get better in your relationship with you. So you said it directly, even. This is, by the way, this is voicing it out. This is articulating a doubt right here. Even though it's in the power column work, it is a doubt. It's a level 3 doubt about the self. So level 3 doubts, we recognize them in the doubt column, but we work on them in the power column. Whereas level 1 and 2 doubts, we recognize in the doubt column and work on in the doubt column. I can explain more about that if people have questions. But, if you're saying this to yourself, you're saying, I mean, you said it directly. I'm not sure I will ever have a super positive relationship with yourself. Well, I just want to tell you, Chris, I didn't have a super positive relationship with myself in many ways until I got to the power column. And what happened with that is I fired a therapist because he was so unempathic to me, I couldn't take it anymore. And the glaringness of that, even though it was very damning and upsetting and it felt horrible, it was kind of relieving to me that I was finally in my own corner. And it made me realize I never had been. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could live the rest of my life being more in my own corner than I was before. Something kind of snapped in there. And it was because I understood something. Now, I understood it through this horrible process in therapy. My goal is to help people understand it without that horrible process, going straight for what I came to understand. And I built the power column out of that experience in large measure. I didn't know I was building it at the time. I was having the experience, but I started to feel really empowered to be myself. And most of all, I started to empathize with myself. I started to recognize my central suffering, what I had been through. And Chris, that's what we do in the power column. We build this thing called the core narrative. So your last comment here was not sure how to cross that hurdle. The core narrative is how you're going to cross this hurdle. Okay. The core narrative is when you tell yourself the story, and I'll help you organize it and shape it so that when you hear it, you actually will have empathy for yourself. You will actually like yourself more. Because the reason we don't like ourselves is not because we're unlikable. And it's also not because we can't like ourselves. It's because we don't know ourselves. And that goes back to your first comment. When Rita says, I could never love someone like you, you only love yourself. And Phil says, that's not true. I don't even like myself. In some ways, they're both right. Rita meant you only think about you. So she was partially right. She had the word wrong of love. It's more that he thinks about himself. And then Phil notes, it's not true. I don't even like myself. But by the end of the movie, he does like himself. And of course, we're not all going to get there by having a Groundhog Day experience, thankfully, because it seems pretty tough in many ways. But we can get there by understanding the core nature of our suffering. And that's what the core narrative is for. I've seen it many times. And when I present it to people, people are like, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll do it. But they don't expect to like themselves. And then they hear their story. They've never heard it before. And I can often be crucial in telling that story. Sometimes people can't do it for themselves. They need to bring it here to the Q&A, or they need to bring it to the group, or they need to send me an email and ask about it. In the group, we get the farthest and the quickest. But I help to shape that story until you feel like, oh, you know what? I really do like me. A good core narrative will either make you very angry or it'll make you want to cry. And sometimes both. And it's because you get in touch with who you are and what you've been through, and you start to like yourself. So essentially, Chris, you're right. You won't get to liking yourself doing the things you've been doing because we don't know any better. We don't know how to do it. The core narrative is an exercise that actually teaches us how to understand something new about ourselves in a crystallized way that actually makes us like ourselves. And that actual liking is why it can shift. Chris, let me know if that made sense to you. Okay. Dorisa says, hi, Dan and everyone. Dorisa, good to see you here. And then Dorisa said, I also had success last week. Great to hear that. She says, I was on vacation and walked a lot. I did experience some payback in my ankles this week, though, but not letting it stop my activities. Okay, so that's great, Dorisa. The one plug I'll put in for here is, this is similar to what I was saying to Karen. Guys, we need to push doubt always, always, always. And you don't have to push it, ferociously or demand things of yourself in the pushing. I just want to put in a plug that doubt, when it's losing, will start to settle for some subtle victories. And it'll say, okay, fine. Yeah, you were able to walk on vacation, but it's going to be a little bit of payback. It just loves to get a little deal in there. And I call this mind-body bargaining. Don't bargain with the symptoms. Demand full surrender. Dorisa, there's no reason you can't go walking on vacation a lot and not experience that payback. Listen, it doesn't matter what I think. It only matters what Dorisa thinks in this situation. But Dorisa, I want you to think about what you are thinking here. Why are you thinking about it that way? The way I think about it is, this is all mind body, and you should be able to walk without any payback. Okay, Majida, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. Good to see you. Let me just scroll down and see where I am in the questions so I'm not way far behind. Okay, Chris Atwater says, I know that sounds like doubt on a high level, and I agree. And then he said third level sort of doubt. Yes. So third level doubt, guys, let me go through the levels of doubt. Level 1 doubt is when you're not sure that you have a mind-body issue. You think it might be physical. So is it physical or is it mind-body? That's level 1 doubt. Level 2 doubt is, I know it's mind-body. I'm not worried it's physical, but I'm worried that my symptom, whether it's a headache or irritable bowel or whatever the specific symptom is, that it's going to be harder to master than others. Okay. Chris doesn't have either of those in what he said here today. He may have them, but that's not what he was talking about. The third level of doubt is, I'm not sure I can get better because of me. I think there's going to be something that's going to stand in my way. When you don't like yourself at some level, which is true for the vast majority of people in some ways, especially before they do this work, they doubt whether they can get better because they don't think that they're very good. When you start to like yourself, it also alleviates that third level doubt. But we also have to go at it directly. We have to ask the question, well, why not? Why was I able to get rid of 8 years of back pain and you wouldn't be able to get rid of this? You can. But you've got it nailed. It is the third level of doubt. By the way, I want to jump back to the characters that Chris was talking about from Groundhog Day. It's really interesting because if you think of any movie, you could think, are they in power or not? Are they in their power column or not? In Groundhog Day, Rita's in her power column right from the start. I don't know how well familiar you guys are with the movies, but she likes herself. She's having a good time. She's doing what she likes. She's pretty in the power column right away. Phil, definitely not. By the end, Phil's so in the power column that this person who's in the power column, Rita, is attracted to him. Rita, who has joined us on Instagram, says, love that movie. So different Rita. I was going to say a lovely Rita, but that's a Beatles reference, which we're really getting off on some pop culture tangents. But I think it can be interesting to start to evaluate who's in power. You could even do it in your own life. Look around and see who has a good relationship with themselves and how did they get there? Let's think about it. But power column work can help you see that. It can expose why you're not there. It can expose why other people are. Okay. Let's see. We have some questions coming in from Instagram. I'm going to get to Catherine Toomer here, and then I'll get to Warrior on YouTube. Okay. Catherine Toomer says, "Hi, Dr. Dan. So much has improved and actually continues to improve as I work in the power column on my relationship with myself." First of all, fantastic. I'm so happy to hear it, Catherine. I'm not surprised. You've been on a good trajectory for a long time, and it does tend to build on itself. Then Catherine says, "Upon waking in the morning, I often still wake up and soon become plagued with thoughts about past and present situations. I see them negatively and feel in fight or flight about how I could improve those negative situations. Even if some of my thoughts about improving situations are good, I should not be having them in a panic state." Agreed. These are my old OCD tendencies. I have improved, but I begin to doubt that I will really get beyond it. I think my OCD is TMS, which is what Sarno called mind body issues. Uh, but then I begin to wonder if my brain was predisposed to OCD and therefore may be close to impossible to get beyond. So doubt creeping in, and level 3 doubt at that. Um, Actually, that's kind of level 2 doubt also because you're saying this OCD symptom's harder to conquer than others. Then she says, "Dr. Dan, tell me something good. Thanks for everything." Okay. So, Catherine, I have a bunch of things to say, and yes, they're all good. First of all, progress is a sign that there can be more progress. So, I want you to recognize that, there's usually not like an endpoint to progress where it's like, yep, you pushed it as far as you could. Good job. You're done. That's not the way it works because if you're still working on these columns, there's gains to be made. My doubt is lower than it was, 2 years ago when I started the podcast. My doubt was very low then. It's even lower now. My emotions column is even more filled out and more understood. And when I say filled out, I don't mean like on paper or anything. I mean in my head. I have it organized. In fact, it's so organized I barely even think about it in certain ways. It just comes to me when I'm having a symptom. My power column, though, and the power column is where it especially expands. The power column has no end to its expansion. Doubt, you're trying to shrink to zero, so it can only go so far, gets to zero, or close to zero. The emotions column, you've got a set number of themes, so you kind of master it. Expansion happens in the power column. And doubts about the self are what hold us back in the power column. This is similar to what I was saying to Chris. That's all that's happening here, Catherine, is you are having doubts. Now, within the power column, level 3 doubts especially. Doubt is using this idea of OCD against you. Here's what I want you to do instead. When you have those negative thoughts, you start to have a second negative thought, which is, oh, here's my OCD. I'm stuck. So that's 2 negative thoughts together. I want you to disable both. First, disable the one that comes in second. Say to yourself, now, wait a minute. OCD is TMS. That means I need to address this. And that means I'm not stuck with this. I just need to push back against doubt and it will not dominate. Okay, that's what you do with the OCD. With the thoughts that come about because of the OCD, and I might even shy away from calling it OCD because the label makes it sound stronger. I might change it to OCD tendencies because then what it shows you is, I just can sometimes, tend in that direction. But you need to attack the specific doubts. One that you voiced was, maybe I'm predisposed for this. Okay, first of all, even people who are predisposed to this, they can stop this. I'm predisposed to that, I suppose, or at least I've had OCD in terms of the tendencies. I don't know that I've been diagnosed with it, but I sure could have been. And I don't like to see diagnosis define us because diagnosis is just a way of describing something. We're much more variable than that. Remember, we are moment-to-moment beings. You are not a person with OCD. You are a person who has moments where you have OCD tendencies. That's a very big difference. And if you draw that distinction, doubt will have less room to work with you on it, work against you on it. But go into those specific doubts you're having. And, let's say you start getting into a negative thought about, oh, I should have done this. That's a moment where you've dipped out of power. So think about why. Why did I dip out of power here? You're saying that you kind of wake up that way, but there's a more specific reason for that. Maybe it's something about the day that you're going to face. Maybe it's a dream that you had. Maybe it's a thought that came into your head right there. Maybe it is a condemnation of power. that, happens right away because you're about to start a new day and it could be a powerful one. We got to get to the specifics. And so we need to brainstorm about that, maybe together. We can do some of that here. Certainly, if you want to come to group, we can get even further with that. But okay, that's a bunch of good stuff. I gave you like a platter of good good things. I want to know, Catherine, if that hit the spot and gives you what you need. If not, keep asking your questions. And I did give you a lot of different kinds of information, so follow each thread as needed, okay? All right. Warrior says, "Hi, Dan. How can ear crackling be mind body? I have ear crackling sounds each time I swallow the last couple of years without a clear explanation." Okay. Great question. And I do want to say there's when mind body issues manifest as sounds, that is a notorious symptom that gets people to doubt because it sounds real. And guess what? Mind body issues are all real. So the fact that they make sounds doesn't matter at all. Here is my explanation of ear crackling. Oh, actually, Warrior, I do want to ask this. There's two different types of ear crackling that you could be describing. One is like you're hearing the sound of crackling, and another is you're feeling popping noises in the ear. So I'm going to give you an explanation of each. I don't know which it is. I'm taking it to mean you're hearing um, the crackling sounds like the actual popping because it's when you swallow, but you tell me. I'll start with that one. So the reason that those crackling noises happen and those popping noises happen is because air gets released in between joints and into the bloodstream. When we get stressed, our oxygen system changes, the delivery system changes, and more air goes to certain areas. The body is interpreting danger and it's sending blood where it needs to go, and it's sending air where it needs to go, and it's sending nutrients where it needs to go, thinks it needs to go. But really, it's just sending it to areas where we're stressed. So that's why when you think about a certain, like you could start thinking about your hand, let's say, oh, I'm worried about my hand. You're actually more likely to develop hand symptoms from thinking about it because the body's going to send everything there. Well, something's going on that's sending it to the ear. And by the way, if you've already had that symptom, you're more likely to think, oh, here it comes again. So this is a repetitive process of having that symptom because it happened once, probably for emotions column reasons, or possibly for some physical trigger reasons. Like in the doubt column, symptoms can get started sometimes from an initial doubt where you engage in a certain movement or motion, and then it leads to a symptom. It sounds like it might be connected to the swallowing. Whatever the case, you don't have to get to the bottom of the origin. You just have to get to the thought, I'm expecting this, and the mind-body setup can make that happen, and it can. It releases oxygen, extra air into the bloodstream, and it gets in between joints and things like that, and then when you move or swallow, because that's a movement, there it is. Okay, so that's the explanation for that. Some people hear ear crackling that is not connected to a movement and doesn't even sound like popping. It's just the sensation of a sound. Like tinnitus is a good example of that. There's not actually something ringing, but they're having a sensation. Well, the thing is, anything that the body can do, the mind can make happen anyway. That's one of my rules of thumb. And in the body, what's happening? There are things called peptides. Warrior, I don't know if you've heard of this or if other people have. Some of you have because I say it a lot. But in Sarno's The Divided Mind, he talks about these. He actually made reference to a woman named Candace Pert, who wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. It's a memoir more than anything else. But within that memoir, she describes the mechanism by which the brain can control anything in the body. And these are called peptides. Peptides can be sent from the brain anywhere in the bloodstream to control any cell in your body to do anything it wants. It can make air go into joints and make popping noises. It can make that crackling sound without doing anything. It can just make those synapses and make the cells, the sensory cells, just light up and make that sound. And that's my I was going to say my short answer, but it's actually a long one. So, Warrior, let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay. All right. I stay in stilettos. Says hello. I like your name. Then she says, I'm suffering with anxiety. I don't like that you're suffering, and I want to help you with that. So let's see. She says, my body been feeling like I'm falling or something. I'm stuck in my head with thoughts. Negative. Let me see if there's any further comments from her. Okay, not yet. So I'm going to make some comments, and then I want you to follow up as usual, because if I answer questions and they're not to your satisfaction, they don't help so much, but they could move us in that direction. So you're saying that your body has been feeling like you're falling or something. So I want to know more about the specifics of it. Is that vertigo? Like, are you getting dizzy, or are you just having the sensation of falling? Whatever it is, the very first thing I'm going to say, and I'm saying this not out of any worry. I'm not concerned at all. There's no reason for me to be, because most of the time this is going to end up being mind body. But have you gotten checked out by a doctor, a medical doctor? The reason I say that is, once that has happened, you can work in this mind body way. So hopefully you already have. If not, I'd go ahead and do it. I don't think they're going to find anything. People have these kind of sensations all the time. But that's the first thing I would say is, let's find out, have you gotten checked out by a doctor? What's the specific physical symptom you're experiencing? Because that'll help me understand things more. And then lastly, you say you're stuck in your head with negative thoughts. I want to know more about those specific negative thoughts. One of the things that you guys are going to find in my system is I'm always going to ask for more specifics, because the more specifically we understand things, the more specific my answers are. Okay, we'll come back to you, but let's do follow up on those questions. Okay, stuck between stations. This is Scott. Says, Dan, not sure if you missed my comments at the beginning. I don't actually have those comments, Scott. They didn't show up for some reason. They must have not gotten loaded, but I'm glad you asked, because clearly I did miss them. So please load them in, and I will jump to you as soon as I have them. Okay? Thanks so much. Guys, if I don't respond to a question, I didn't see it. I will never not respond. Even if I didn't have time to respond, I'm going to tell you, and we'll make a plan to talk about it. Okay? All right. Then Dorisa said, but I did find out that it is harder to relax than I thought, even though I have many self-care practices. That's a really good insight, Dorisa. And so she's saying, she had success last week, but, she found out it's harder to relax than she thought. It's often the case that we don't know ourselves fully in terms of what we're experiencing. There are times where I don't even realize I'm tired, for example, and then I'll finish something and I'll be exhausted. Or there are times where, and I've had this exact one that Doris is talking about, where I think, oh yeah, I could relax. And then when it's time to switch off, I can't. I'm actually not the greatest sleeper. It's one of the places where my mind-body experience really plays out. And one of the things that I struggle with is I have trouble winding down at night. I want to keep going. Even when I'm exhausted, I want to keep going. So, Dorisa, what I want to say to that is, this is a great thing to know about. And we can start to ask questions about what's happening that's getting in the way of relaxation. A lot of times it's things that, if we think about it, we know it, but we don't usually think about it. If you hadn't even recognized that it was the case that you were having trouble relaxing, you wouldn't be able to expose this. But now you're starting to get somewhere seeing it. Okay. Jane Smith, good to see you here. She says, hi, Dr. Dan. So glad to see you again. Couldn't make it last week due to a crisis and doing so unwell, including a cough of a few weeks. I'm sorry to hear that. I thought it was allergies, but could it be TMS? The answer to that is yes. I apologize for smiling, but the reason I smile is not because you're suffering, but because so many things are TMS or mind body that it really pays to assume that they are. Unless you're in some situation where it's really potentially dangerous, then you need to get checked out by a doctor, but that's very rare. Almost all symptoms are mind body, and it's good to assume that and treat them as such. Jane says, I've been so stressed and my stomach is so upset and it's hard to eat. I've had such a hard time extricating myself from the stress. I thought I was following my dream, but it became a nightmare. Interesting, though upsetting, obviously. I want to find out more about this dream that you thought you were following, but how it became a nightmare. One thing I want to encourage you all, and this is similar to what I was saying to Chris, actually, or Catherine, or a lot of you, you're not stuck. I promise you're not. What needs to happen is you need to understand the specifics. What are the specifics that are making something a nightmare, whether it's a dream or not? If you understand the specifics, you can get past it. I'm editing the book, and there was a part where I was saying that stress is understood in general terms. People say, oh, you need to reduce stress, but we all know we're not really going to be able to reduce general stress. How are we going to do that? You can, though, reduce specific stress. And so I want you to get that into words, Jane, whatever it is, what's making it this stressful? Okay. Okay. Then Chris Atwater says, that makes sense, Dan. Thanks. This is about the power column question. One more question. Going through the emotions column and understanding how that is the foundation for thoughts, I have a hard time tying them to the other columns. Meaning, okay, I get it. That experience was messed up, but is it really possible that a set of experiences created all of these doubts? I ask because I had a ton of years that never triggered symptoms. Why has this changed? Just curious. Thanks. Okay, fantastic questions. Here's the first thing. The emotions column is a set of themes that is likely to cause symptoms of some kind. But remember, those symptoms don't have to be very physicalized. They could simply have been anxiety, or they could have been depression. So I would say that actually in those years where you weren't so triggered, it was probably manifesting in other symptoms, but it also was probably not manifesting in nearly as big symptoms. And that's because of power column stuff. So these columns work independently and together. So I just want you to know that I don't think that the emotions column is the foundation for your thoughts. Your thoughts are its own things. You have a lifetime of thinking with yourself about different things, and they can take their own path. You can get doubt going without any emotional issue. So your doubt may just be up more right now. In fact, that happens for people at certain nodes of their lives. That's kind of what a quote unquote midlife crisis is because we're at a certain stage of life, we're thinking differently. So emotions don't stay the same. Even if our main themes stay the same, how they're manifesting doesn't. We're changing. We're changing all the time. So that's why things can be so different. But I'm going to go a step further even. In the power column, it's even more that way. Because you have to remember, power column symptoms are there because they want you to receive the communication of how you've suffered. And the older we get, the more urgent the power column becomes. It says to us, come on, we got to figure this out while there's time to live. And that's what a midlife crisis is really all about. We've got to get going with these things. So, Chris, in summation, the emotions column isn't the foundation of your thoughts. I think they're separate. The themes that you have can manifest in different ways. They probably were manifesting in a less intense way because less intense things were going on. And your power column journey is really picking up the pace now. Let me know if that made sense. Okay. Jane Smith then said, I heard another mind body coach today, and after 5 minutes, I thought how much I appreciate you because you have room for me and because you believe I am a moment-to-moment individual. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate you saying it, but I'm also so glad you feel that way. Not necessarily about the other mind body coach not making it feel that way, but listen, I only do things that work. And my system had to be built around individuals. It had to be something that individuals can use because we're all individuals. Our brains work differently than other people's, and we're not going to get things out of what people say generally if it doesn't fit with what we specifically think. So, Jane, I really appreciate you as well. Thanks so much. Okay, Catherine Toomer had a response on Instagram. Yes, that platter of good things did hit the spot. Okay, good to hear it. So hitting the spot that you brought me to tears and laughter. Disabling the OCD tending thought is right on. And as you say it, I know I can do it. That's fantastic. Then she says, addressing the individual thoughts seems harder. Asking why I am dipping out of power sounds good as a beginning. I agree. And I would just start there. Don't listen, for a person with some OCD tendencies, don't dive so much into the details. Not yet. Let's have you challenge the big picture, challenge that big doubt. You can get past this, and let's have you look at power. Just do that as a starting point. Okay, we'll address individual thoughts later, but not yet. Okay, let's see. And the thing you said about a condemnation of power feels right, even though I don't fully know what you mean. Thanks again. So what I do mean by that is that we all are a bit afraid of becoming powerful. We're afraid that people will resent us, that they won't like the changes, that they'll be threatened by it, that they'll think we're being arrogant or obnoxious. Becoming powerful is not low risk, actually, at first. In fact, it tends to bring out who your real friends are. And I say, don't be afraid to find that out. Better to know. You can handle it if you find out somebody's not really your friend, then they're not worth your time. Okay, Cindy Krista says, more air goes to my torso and I have gas-like pains all the time. Face blue, wide eyes. I don't know what that is in reference to, Cindy. Hold on, let me see if you said something further. Okay, though that might have been an emoji. It's probably an emoji that it was described in words. But so this idea of more air going to the torso and giving gas-like pains, that's actually something that, first of all, makes a lot of sense with what we know about the body. When you're stressed, cortisol gets released, and it has all sorts of effects. Well, one of them is you're more likely to develop a gas. So people get bloating when they're stressed. This also fits with that question that Warrior was asking about the ears, because this is more corroboration that, yes, airflow changes can happen in all kinds of parts of the body. These are just two different manifestations of that. Sarno's oxygen deprivation theory, where there isn't enough muscle oxygen going to certain muscles. Well, guess what? That extra oxygen is going somewhere. It doesn't just disappear. So it shifts where it goes. I hope that makes sense, guys. Okay, Scott, thank you for your patience and reposting your questions, because I did not get them as I mentioned. All right. Dan, more EMDR processing. That's a kind of trauma therapy that I highly recommend on Tuesday. Only about 17 to 18 sets. That's kind of going through the EMDR process. You go through these abbreviated short processing sets, but pretty significant final 2 images. The 10-year-old pre-Australia me, that's before his major trauma, basically took over the majority of the session. Interesting. Shooting down the doubts of the post-Australia me about deserving punishment, pain, symptoms, or condemnation. Nearly laughter several times. The final 2 images of the 10-year-old me leading some camp activity at my old elementary school gym, and the future me co-leading some kind of group. Wow. Oh my God, this sounds amazing. Reminded me of you never thinking you were meant to lead. I have said that before. I always thought I would be kind of more, I would be second in command. I would always be very, very helpful, very powerful, but not the most powerful. That's not that way anymore. I go ahead and lead in virtually everything that I do. This is really exciting, Scott. Okay, question is, the symptoms keep going up the closer it seems like we are getting. Is that simply doubt trying to attack and not give up, or am I missing something? Been totally fatigued this week, especially post EMDR, and the neck, shoulder, arms, chest, mid-back stuff has been barf. Really not good. So let me get back to the central question here is, what's happening that the symptoms are going up? I actually think, Scott, what that is your body is processing that you can finally receive the message. And so it might hurt for a bit. You know, when I first got the message about my back pain truly being about emotional issues, the pain actually went up at first. And that was me processing how much things were hurting. So this is a physical manifestation of your power column experience, of your core suffering. This is a physical manifestation of it. It's not going to last. And, you know, I think that that's the way you need to think about this, is to give yourself space to feel that as a translation of your emotional experience means that it won't last. If you start to think about it as, uh-oh, what's happening? And doubt gets hold of you, that's the only way it can last. But that's not going to happen because we're going to fight it. So interpret it as a power column symptom that is giving you the communication. Receive that communication. See how much it hurts. See how tired you are. You're this tired from fighting off this stuff. And let that be something that you can process so that you can put it away. Typically, power column symptoms, they can sometimes last for a couple months while you're going through this. I don't say that discouragingly. I actually mean it encouragingly. Nothing bad is happening here. Good stuff is happening. I have seen this many, many times. I've experienced it myself on more than one occasion because I've processed various traumas. You will come out of this. Keep doing the work. This is very exciting that you're having some changes where the pre-Australia you is getting to come back into the picture more and be more who you are. That would be very healing for your trauma, as you know. Okay, then Jane Smith says, I feel so completely beaten down by this dream turned nightmare. Should I be focusing on being very specific about how this connects to a core theme? I would, Jane, because there's something specific happening here that you're telling yourself. And in the power column, something's going awry there where you don't feel good about you. And I can pretty much guarantee it's going to fit with that core theme, that core suffering you. So let's get specific about it. We could even go back to the core narrative and look at specifically, what have we said so far? What needs to be said? What is this dream? How did it turn a nightmare? And what does it mirror? Let's find out about that, okay? And I am going to be here next week, so let's continue to discuss it. We're going to stop in a minute, but I want to make a couple of comments or get to a couple of comments as we finish. Cindy Christa said, the ear error was what I was commenting on. I did grasp that, Cindy, yes. It was a very helpful comment, actually, because you were talking about how airflow changes in you in a different way, and that was in support of that, and I appreciate that. So I'm glad seems like I read that correctly, but thank you for making sure that I did get the right idea. Okay, we'll finish up on Chris here today. He says, my symptoms are shapeshifters. First, it was eye ulcers, which my ophthalmologist described as approximately shingles of the eye. Then I started coughing, nerves. Next was tremoring, and now nausea. No idea what's next, but is it odd that symptoms move around? No, it is not, Chris. Symptoms move around all the time, and they move around for two different reasons. The two primary reasons they move around is, one, you have a very active emotional experience going on. So it's moving from symptom to symptom because there's a lot of emotional stuff going on. But secondly, symptoms move around a lot when doubt is not actually as high. When doubt is high, symptoms stay in one place typically. When they start moving around, that's a sign that you're on to something. So you are in this process that is working. Now, here's my question to you. Have they always been shapeshifters, or are they starting to be now? If they're starting to be now, we've got doubt on the run. That's a very good sign. If they've always been that way, it's not bad news, but it just means that we've got emotions column work to fill out those themes more and see how they relate to these individual symptoms so you can start getting control of them. It's not bad news either way. Chris Adwater says, always. So this is more emotions column work then. As long as doubt, I see you said unfortunately, and I agree because you're having them all the time. The good news is that can change, and it's going to change in three different ways, each for a column. One, when your doubt is lower, you're not going to get as worried about this. When your emotions column is more filled out and you're more well-versed at using it, you're going to be able to make those symptoms go away faster. And thirdly, and this is ultimately going to be the most important one, when you have a better relationship with you, you're going to have a lot less symptoms. The emotional field will not be bouncing around as much. So my recommendation is keep working the columns, keep building them out, keep asking your questions, and that's actually going to shift. This is a sign that you've had a lot of emotional tumult throughout your whole life, and I can help you get it organized and figure out the how-to of what to do with it. Okay. Hang in there, Chris. Thanks. Okay, that Jane said, just seeing you and hearing your voice is healing for me. Thank you, Jane, and I'm glad. Thanks again for being here, Dr. Dan. See you next week. It's my pleasure, guys. It's always a pleasure getting time with you and getting time to think about these issues because you guys, the questions you raise are so great And they're so helpful for so many people as I answer them. But I couldn't do it without your questions. And a lot of how I figured these things out and learned about them is from questions. So keep them coming. That's why I do this. Okay. And we can get you all relief as we work at it. Chris Atwater says, thanks, Dr. Dan. It's my pleasure. Thank you all. And I'll be here same time next week, Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. As always, you can go to my website, www.crushingdoubt.org. That's where you can get any of my resources, or you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org, if you have questions about it. You can take my seminars to learn all about mind-body experience, how to think about it, and why you'll get better. And you can come to the groups to get direct interaction with me every week. Just let me know. Okay, now, Scott then says, thanks, Dan. Just repeating to myself that the emotional is coming out as the physical. That is the key for you right now, Scott. That's what's happening. It is a physical manifestation of what you felt emotionally. And that's not bad news, even though it sucks. Really hard, but not going to last. That's actually towards the tail end of the work, okay? Of the work of beating symptoms. The work of being in the columns and a powerful person, of course, that never ends. We fight out and keep up our power. But you are getting somewhere big. And I see a lot of progress in everybody that I'm hearing in multiple ways. So let's keep talking, guys. Thanks so much. Looking forward to more times together. I'll see you next week.